By the way, before I start, I really love your documentary. So,
Thank you.
okay. So I am with Soo Kim, the director behind The Last of the Sea Women. I'm going to start off first off with a very superficial question. I've been thinking about Jeju Island for the last decade on a very surface level because I used to eat at just a great burger place in Koreatown, and the people said, "Well, if you like this pork burger, it has nothing in comparison to Jeju because the pork there is amazing." And I was thinking that that was a lie, and then that person also said Jeju Island is a great place for a honeymoon. So superficially, have you heard about those? Are those assessments true about the area?
Yes, 100%. So Jeju is really known for its black pork, and I forgot what that means, but that's the term is black pork, and it's like what when you go to like the K barbecues places in Jeju, they're not serving beef so much; they're serving black pork. So, and I've had it; it's delicious. It's like some fusion of pork belly and pork. It's so good. But also, yes, Jeju is considered the Hawaii of Korea. Like it's been very important historically for many, many reasons, but the main kind of draw to it now is people tend to go there to get married or for their honeymoons. Like that's the sort of function of Jeju right now is this tropical, beautiful place to get married or to honeymoon.
Logistically, as a filmmaker, how difficult was it to mount this documentary? Because I'm assuming it's not an overnight, it's not a 2 hour flight from Oregon to Jeju. So can you just tell us what was your schedule like and how long did it take for you to film the documentary? I'm assuming over a period of time. So
Yeah. So the actual like principal filming took almost 2 years. It was just under 2 years of filming continuously with our Haenyo subjects. So we really covered a decent spectrum of their life. So basically, I am based in the US, but I would fly to Korea probably between every month to every 6 weeks, which was, a lot of travel, and that really did a number on me physically. But it was kind of convenient because I was working on another project. I was working on a documentary series that was also filmed in Korea. It was filmed mostly in Seoul, so I would kind of group up the two projects. So I'd go to Korea, film for a week or 10 days in Seoul, and then go down to Jeju and then film for a week or 10 days there. Then go home for about a month, 6 weeks, and come back and do it all over again. So spend a lot of time on airplanes.
well, I mean, I'm assuming I don't know what it's like to make a documentary, but I'm assuming you're at home, maybe on your laptop or maybe some kind of edit bay. However, editing during that interim. So is it that month you're in your respective office editing footage as well? So it's sort of a never ending thing for you?
No, it was actually, we didn't really start editing till we were at the tail end of filming. So, typically in an ideal schedule, you film and then you take all the footage and then you go into the edit because that's really where you start to create the story. And it's really hard to create that story if you're still in the midst of gathering all the footage. In our case, we did start editing before we finished filming just because there were so many things that happened that were unplanned, like all things in documentary. Like we're really following our subjects, but life takes a turn and then you have to go scramble back and follow this new thing. So for instance, in the film, you see one of our subjects being invited to the UN to speak. That was an unanticipated event that we had started editing and pulling the story together. And then she was asked to give this big speech on behalf of the Haenyos of Jeju. We had to cover that, of course. So then we had to stop editing, go film this thing, which actually was kind of a wonderful ending to the film, or sort of a climactic point of their activism. So that there was a bit of crossover in this process. But for the most part, we filmed the large majority of the film, and then we really dove into the edit.
It's sort of graphic, but one of the Hanyos I think she said, our heads will be severed and, we're going to keep on working until our heads are
Yeah.
severed. That just sounded a ton of strength and dedication. What's it like for you? You're embarking on the project, but you're also learning about their lives and about their inner strength. How inspiring was it to be amongst these women?
Oh, it was incredible. I mean, I knew quite a bit about the Haenyo before starting the project. So I had been introduced to them as a young girl. And that's really what started my fascination with them. So I devoured every book I could find about them, every magazine article, every news piece. As I was growing up, I was sort of obsessed with them. And then I started going back to Jeju to find them in my adult years. So I had a pretty good understanding of who they were, their role in the history of Korea and the history of Jeju. But I still did, once we started filming, I still did learn so much more about them, about who they are as people and how their dynamics are with each other, like what a tight knit sisterhood kind of community they are. So those were all things that I didn't really see until I was able to just embed with them in their communities. And it was deeply inspiring. It was one of those projects where we joked about it on the crew. Every day we'd all be in tears about something, either something that they said or something that someone said in an interview or something that they did for us or for their fellow Haenyo. It was always very deeply emotional. So our joke was like we were the crew that cries because we just were behind the cameras constantly crying and being inspired by them.
If you're not crying, by the way, you're horrible people.
Yeah.
Because this is,
Dead inside.
I almost got there's a section where I almost got teary eyed because I cry when I get a paper cut. There's one of the. Can you just speak to one of the Hanyos who's so just feels so much not embarrassment, feels bad she can't actually go out to the sea, to the ocean.
Yeah.
Even though she can, if she wants, she can just live off, understandably so, her late husband's pension, which is what
Right.
most 99.99% of people would. That's normal life, but she still
Exactly.
wants to go out there. Can you? What's it like? Just
Yeah.
to they never want to stop, right? You know.
No, no, this is like it's who they are. I mean, it technically is an occupation, but even one of our Haenyos says this in the beginning of the film, it's actually a calling. They feel like it's a calling. Like there's a spiritual relationship that they have to this work and a spiritual relationship that they have to the ocean and a spiritual relationship that they have to each other as a community. So they basically never retire unless that they are forced to because of health reasons. Like one of the woman that you mentioned that talks about how we've been diving since we've been living and working in the ocean since we were 17 and we won't stop till our necks are severed. It's like, I guess it's a very extreme Jeju phrase of means like, till we die. She's still diving every day. They don't stop because to them, it's not a job. It's not a job you retire from. It would be like saying, I'm not going to walk anymore. It's part of their daily life, their daily ritual, and it gives them an immense amount of joy and it connects them to the earth and to the planet and to the ocean, which is, again, it's a spiritual relationship that they have. So it's not something of all the subjects that we had, none of them retired. And I don't see any of them retiring unless they have to because of health reasons.
That is amazing. What was it like shooting on the day when you have the younger Hanyos from the neighboring island? What is the neighboring island called again?
Jeju Island.
Goji Island. So those two Hanyos, can you just talk about the shooting day when they're connecting with the older generation in Jeju with those Hanyos? What was that shooting day like? Because you're talking about relationships. One generation feeds off the other for inspiration and comfort. Must have been an amazing day to shoot.
It really was. So like actually they met at this sort of press conference about the Fukushima radioactive water. We weren't even intending for them to meet. They both were attending the press conference because they both wanted to find out more about this issue. And they naturally found each other. And the minute that they found each other, I mean, we filmed it. You could see it in the film. The older Haenyos instantly kind of mob them and they want to know everything about them. And you could see that the older Haenyos are so delighted to know that there are maybe actually younger women that want to continue their tradition and like that they could maybe pass the torch to. Like they're trying to set them up with their sons. They're like asking them all about how much marine life there is to catch. They really kind of glommed onto them in like the most endearing way. And then they see them, successively at other protests. And then at the end, you see them at the Haenyeo Festival. that Haenyeo Festival scene was so moving to film. It was another situation where I think we were all crying behind the camera because the older Haenyeo subjects, they were so touched by the younger Haenyeos' interest and participation in this culture. And they wanted to do whatever they could to help them. And they really wanted them to understand that it was very much like a passing of the baton, like the torch being passed. And the younger Haenyeo, of course, they look up to the older Haenyeo. They revere them. They are the ancestors. They're the predecessors. They're the ones that have really nurtured and protected this precious culture that the younger Haenyeo have taken on. So it felt very much like a passing of the torch. And it was very moving. I mean, it was, you saw the subjects were crying. They were all crying because I think they recognized a kinship with each other.
On that kinship, not like you're thinking about this because you're really wanting to spotlight this community, this culture. But what if years from now, or maybe even in the now, you have women of all ages watching The Last of the Sea Women, and they become inspired to become Haenyos? I mean, have you thought about that, and what does that feel like? Because that's not your intent, but there's something that springs forth from this.
Well, it kind of was my intent. I mean, it wasn't necessarily my intent to recruit younger women, but it was my intent to show how beautiful and precious and significant this culture is, and how part of protecting the culture is making sure that it can continue on in some form. And that really relies on younger women maybe adopting it and figuring out, just like our two younger Haenyeo subjects, Jungmin, so figuring out how it makes sense in their life. Like, what are the benefits that, like, they figured out how to brand it on social media and make it more of a younger, modern thing. Like, I hope younger women maybe come to the culture and the profession and put some effort in making sure that it's carried on, because I think it would be such a loss if we truly lose the Haenyeo culture.
It's a cliche, and I've heard this over the years, that something like an art project is never completely finished; it's abandoned. And I never realized that until I'm watching projects like this. Do you ever feel that way? Because your documentary is finished, you finished the post, you're releasing it out to the world, but there's a part of you that still wants to make that commute to keep up with what's going on. And what is that feeling like, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, we could have continued on filming if we had the budget to keep on filming. We absolutely could have, because there's more story to tell. And also, the thing about our film is that it does end on a slightly bittersweet note, in that which we were not able, the Haenyeos were not able to stop the Fukushima radioactive water from being released. The activisms, the UN, nothing was able to change that course from happening. So it is sort of unresolved in terms of that water is continuing to be released into the ocean. The Haenyeo are continuing to have to deal with it and to decide if they feel safe diving in the ocean, and also keeping an eye on what's happening to the marine life as a result of it. So yeah, I mean, technically we could have kept filming, but it did feel right for us to end where we did, which is the sort of passing of the torch from the older Haenyeo to the younger Haenyeo. And the older Haenyeos at the very end, just sort of acknowledging, yes, this water is being released, but at the same time, we're not going to stop diving. This is what we do. Even in my next life, I'll dive again. Like, that felt like the right, most authentic ending is just that resilience that they are always exhibiting.
Sue, I don't have to tell you this because you're a documentarian and you're also a cinephile. So many documentaries we watch go so under the radar that you have to find it. What is it like for you? A24, Apple TV, people can watch it, very popular and beloved producer along with you, and, as part of the creative. Can you just speak to those elements, and how awesome is that, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, it is truly an embarrassment of riches. And I sometimes I still can't believe it, how all these incredible partners lined up. And again, I think I might have mentioned, I tried for years to get this film made, and nobody wanted to make it. I couldn't get it funded. No one, everyone was like, oh, the Haenyo, they sound really interesting, and this is an interesting story, but this story feels very niche. It feels very specific. So for years, I tried to pitch this and I couldn't get it made. And basically what happened is Malala and her team came on board this project. And the minute they came on board, doors started to open. And that's when we partnered with A24. And then A24, Malala and extracurricular and myself, we pitched it to Apple, and Apple immediately came on board. I think I would give them full credit for instantly seeing the value of telling this story in a way that other streamers and other studios didn't. So I really feel like we found the right home with them. But it's funny because it is such an embarrassment of riches of wonderful production partners that we have now. And it was in direct juxtaposition to years of having closed doors. So I, more than anyone, know how easily this film could have gotten lost in the shuffle or could have just never gotten made. And I think my lucky stars, honestly, I can attribute it all to Malala and the extracurricular team. That's really when my luck turned, and that's really when people started taking this story seriously. So look,
yeah. I'm scared of overanalysis in my own shadow, but do you ever think of those days, how many times along those years that you could have quit? And does that ever trip you out that you just did not quit and you had that fighting spirit that you're talking about in your documentary?
Yeah. I mean, it was all, even when I kind of mentally shelved it, it never was that far away from me. And that's actually how it happened with Malala. Is they didn't know about this story. The president of her company, Extracurricular, had watched my earlier film, The Speed Cubers. And so she reached out to me because she really liked the film, and she just asked, is there a story that you're dying to tell? And so I'm like, oh, of course. Let's talk about my Haenyo story, because it was, again, fresh. It was shelved in my mind, but it was also still fresh in my mind of like, I knew someday there would be a time for telling this story. And so it finally came around. And yeah, I don't think I was ever really going to give up on it, but I was waiting for the right partner to come along.
Selfishly, is your number one audience not the world? Of course, they are a big audience, but I'm sure that your number one audience are your loved ones and the Haenyos. Their reaction, have you gotten any kind of reaction from them regarding?
Oh, yeah. We've shown them the film, and I mean, they love it. They have all cried, and they've seen it in the theaters and the screenings at the festivals. They've been there. That's kind of my favorite part of this whole process, is watching them watch themselves on the big screen, and then watching them start to understand how much the audience loves them. They've been given standing ovations at almost all the screenings. And so that's been the most gratifying part for me, is just seeing these women that probably thought that they would never be recognized in this way, and certainly never be recognized outside of the region of Korea. They're seeing Western audiences giving them standing ovations, and they're so touched and they're so deeply emotional. So that's been my favorite part of the past few weeks, is just watching them experience that.
Well, I don't envy you. I'm assuming on some of those Q&As, you just have to keep it together and not cry in front of it.
Oh, every single Q&A, I've been crying, because I've been doing it with them, and they say something that makes me cry, or they start singing their rowing song, the labor song. Beautiful things keep happening, and it's a joke, because I keep telling everyone my one goal is to make it through a Q&A without crying, and I just cannot keep it together.
And I'm sure the audience is doing the same thing. But final couple questions is, along with resilience, what does it take, in your opinion, to be an effective filmmaker and storyteller, just from your POV and experience?
That's interesting. That's a good question. I think when it comes to documentaries, there's lots of different types of documentaries. And I think the different genres of documentaries require different characteristics. My type of documentary that I tend to do is observational and more like cinema verite. I'm not so much narrating a story or like pulling it structurally together. I'm really allowing the characters to live in front of the camera and they're telling us their story. I work in a more observational space. And I think for people that do that kind of documentary filmmaking and storytelling, it's really important to be deeply sensitive and deeply open to what the energy and what's happening. Because if you're observational, you really have to pick up on subtle signs of what's happening in front of the camera. You almost have to kind of predict what's going to happen. You have to like know how a person is feeling just by their body language or by knowing their character and like knowing that something is off for them. And so luckily, for me, I've always been a very observant, sensitive kind of watcher. Like in a party, I'm always on the outskirts, just watching what's happening. And I think that skill has helped me in documentary filmmaking because I think I'm able to see people as they really are, even if maybe what they're saying is contrary to what they're exhibiting. I feel like I can see people in the way that they really are. And I think that's a useful skill as a storyteller.
The final two questions is the speed cubers. My 8-year-old niece, for about a month or two, she was giving me the small Rubik's cube, and we'd go to YouTube and try to solve it. And I said, let's just do something else. I give up, and I feel so horrible because over the weekend I'm going to watch the speed cubers with her. What can she and what can I experience from the speed cubers? And just reading up about this doc, how great is it to see that relationships still continue after this documentary as well?
Oh, it's great. I mean, I'm still very close with the subjects in that documentary because that world of speed cubing was actually my world because my son is a speed cuber. That's how I found it. I think when you watch the documentary, it's called The Speed Cubers, and it's about the world of competitive speed cubing, but it has a much deeper message. It's about the friendship and the relationship of the two best speed cubers in the world and how they handled their rivalry / friendship at the World Championships, which is like the world's biggest stage for cubing. And I think it's really a story about friendship. It's a story about compassion. One of our characters is neuroatypical. And so there's just a whole host of kind of humanistic themes baked into that film that are much deeper than just speed cubing. It's really kind of an examination of like how to connect with someone that you might not normally have connected with, and how to be a compassionate person in your life to the people that you're exposed to, by virtue of your hobbies or the passions in your life.
And again, very quickly, just like last several years, it was released 2020. You must have gotten so much positive feedback from people who watch your documentary. That must feel good too, right?
It is nice. I mean, yeah, that documentary seems to really hit people in a certain emotional way because of this beautiful friendship that's at the center of the documentary. But yeah, it's been nice to hear from people that it resonated with them, that it impacted them in some way emotionally. So yeah, it's been nice.
So final question is for my Find Your Film podcast, I ask filmmakers and actors to just recommend a movie that they really love and that really speaks to them on a human level. Can you name or recommend a movie that is really special to you and what makes it unique?
I mean, there's so many movies that I love. I'm just going to talk about one that came out this year, and I just was to struck by it. It's called Box Diaries, and it's a documentary about this Japanese woman who it's a little it's a little traumatic. She experienced a sexual assault, and it was about her. And from a person in a high position of power. And it's about her journey towards trying to get justice in light of that crime. And she's the director of it, and she's the subject. And this trauma happened to her. And it's such a brave, powerful telling of her own story. And the whole time I'm just like so in awe of her strength and bravery, especially in that culture. It's, she talks about it quite at length in the film about how it's not talked about. People don't usually come out publicly to say that these things happen to them. And so she really kind of went through a lot of pressure from her family, from Japanese society, from the media, because she was a newscaster. It's really powerful, and it's like such a statement about how brave you have to be sometimes to tell your own story on film, and you have to really expose yourself and be vulnerable. But I can only imagine other women seeing this documentary could take so much inspiration and be inspired to tell their own stories of their own traumas that have happened to them. So yeah, I love it. Black Box Diaries, so good.
Definitely will check it out, and I hope a lot of people check out The Last of the Sea Women. Thank you so much, Sue Kim. We really
Thank you
appreciate
so much. Yeah, this is a
it.
great conversation. Thank you.